Okay, welcome everyone to Sass Mass. I'm just posting the terms of engagement in the chat. You would take a moment and read those. This is our weekly chat for members in any of our programs for foundations or Spellcrafters Guild. We come here every week at this time on Sunday to do our witchy chat. You're welcome to be on or off camera. The ways that we kind of interact is we can share on a variety of topics, on anything really witchy, magical shadow work topics, anything that you might have questions on. You can raise your hand. Sometimes that might be under reactions or it might be under the more. And if you want to weigh in on a subject, raise your hand and type weigh in on the chat. We are good about like switching topics. So just because a topic starts at Sass, it doesn't mean we have to stay on that topic. So feel free to just like interact in the chat. Feel free to post emojis like hearts or whatever reactions you like. It helps people feel encouraged when they're talking. And that's kind of covers all the bases. If you have trouble with any of the tech stuff, just come off and just start waving around and we'll find you. So thanks for being here. Happy March 17th.
Hi, guys. I forgot about the microphone again. I'm struggling with the microphone lately because it feels really intrusive. Like it's always in my way, but it's like supposed to be kind of in my way, you know? Anyway, hi, guys. How about this week? How has this week been for you guys? Man, I have been tired. Feels like tired. It feels like, I don't know. Like, I think I was saying it in the live this morning. It's not like, woohoo, but it's not like, oh no. It's like somewhere right in the middle. And yeah, that's where I've been. For those of you that this is your first Sass, I am just up here starting the flow of conversation. And anyone at any time can like decide to weigh in on something if it sparks your, I don't know, whatever. I'm having a hard time with words today. Like really hard time with words. Uh yeah. So at any time you can weigh in, or you could change the subject, or you could ask advice. We all like giving advice a lot. If you're going through something challenging, this is a really great place for you to be able to get lots of different perspectives on something so you can kind of feel out what works for you. Man, I keep going back and forth on like, I'm personally going through a thing that is bringing up like a bunch of shadow work with regards to asking for help, like a lot of it. And I'm usually really reluctant to like go into personal stuff in this space because a lot of like people end up sending a bunch of messages to Maria checking on me and, and things like that. Like, she's got to be doing terribly because look at what's going on with her. So, uh, I've gotten to a place in my life that when catalyst happens or when I'm like called to do something that is like uncomfortable, I, that I'm looking forward to doing that kind of shadow work because I've gotten to this place that things I've really cultivated this relationship with a lot of things and I understand what's going on and a lot of times I see them coming and I I got news from my like neurologist and primary care physician that I need to have someone here with me more often. And I have known that I was going to be needing like a magician's assistant just for the stuff that I do with Bright and Dark for the last year, but I didn't put it together that it was actually this medical need until I got a bunch of testing and stuff done this last year. And so I've gotten to that place where it's like, yeah, it's actually like happening. So that is really challenging because it's also one of the things that I was diagnosed with is epilepsy. And so there's a lot of things that are involved with that. Like I can't drive for a while. So having someone here to like help me with that kind of stuff is becoming increasingly important, but that's a really vulnerable thing to like request, I guess. It's interesting. It's really an interesting journey for me. So there it is. I'm going to be talking about it more because and I actually talked to Maggie, who is our like risk management person at the resource center about what that process would maybe look like of finding someone that would want to you know, come up to Alaska and help me with life in general. So, yeah, crickets. So, I'll be doing like videos about it and everything, trying to dial in that person that it would be expansive for them to do that because it's not just like domestic stuff that uh I'm really struggling with because of the like epilepsy and Ehlers-Danlos and that kind of stuff. But it's the um it's all the other things that I do that I am incredibly passionate about. We're at this place at the resource center that we have been working on this big project for a long time. And there is a lot of like, stuff involved with that. And from content creation to meetings and all of these things. And yeah, there went my train of thought. I'm actually not sorry about it, honestly and truly, though I do have emotions and feelings of grief sometimes. It's that like, and I'm still asking that grief like what its name is. So I let it happen. But again, I've gotten to that point in my relationship with my emotions that it does. I'm stubbornly independent as well. Like stubbornly independent, but most of my life I've lived with a lot of community around me. Kim knows this. I've had a lot of people around me, so it hasn't been a problem. But living in Alaska is very, very different. And I often spend like weeks by myself completely. Hi, Maria.
Hello. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, I think that it's like, oh, sometimes, especially like, people coming on and engaging with people with shadow work, but it's always like nice, not, it's just that we're all going through like our own things,
Right.
and
Yeah.
like stuff comes up, and even if you've been doing shadow work for 50 years, like it just is a flowing thing. You
Hmm.
kind of like engage with it differently, maybe, but it always is there from time to time or more times.
Well, and I mean, the other side of this is I saw this coming like for a long time. Those on the support team know I've been talking about this for at least a year and a half. before I even had the like medical diagnoses to be like, hey, this is a real thing. So that would be, um, so Bridget, I love that you put that in there because this is kind of this debate that's going on right now. And I'm going to be having help. One of the witches in the community uh, works with that kind of dog training, right? Rufio very well might already be uh, doing this. He might already be signaling for when I'm like having seizures, because when I'm having the in that like dissociative state, there's sometimes that he will come right up to my face and bark. And it's so shocking when he does it, but it snaps me like right out of that like space. So it's very possible that he might already be signaling for that kind of stuff. So we're going to assess that. The problem is more in that because they're dissociative, we don't know how often, I don't know how often it's actually happening, and or even how long they are. I lose time, but I also have ADHD. So like that's what I've been kind of chalking it up to for years and years and years. And I smoke a lot of weed. So I might have like been subconsciously self-medicating most of my life, which my doctor thought was really funny. I was like, so does this mean that I can smoke more weed? But my goal has been to like wean off because like that's what I've been poked toward. Um, and the epilepsy medication that I'm on is actually helping. It feels like it's doing for me what I was self-medicating. Uh, so that's exciting to me as well. But yeah, there's going to be times where I'm going to be processing emotions about it. Uh, there's frustration, definitely frustration involved too, because of that whole, there's so much conditioning that we're supposed to be able to do everything. And what I'm not doing is falling into that self-talk of being broken or that something's wrong with me. That's not what's going on. Uh, this is just a part of my journey. This is a part of my relationship with my physical life. I do so much work in behind the veil that this is a way for me to stay really balanced, because I have to be extra mindful of what my physical body experiences. But at the same time, that is really, really difficult to do and still keep up with like all of the things. But yeah. Uh I yeah, so there is definitely frustration there. But the recognition that it is also my preference to have people around. It there's a part of me that thrives with that. I mean, it's even in my human design chart. There's a part of me that needs community around me. Uh not just like spiritually, but physically as well now. It's just my guides being like, hey, bitch, pay attention, do the thing. It's not like they don't, it's funny, they don't tell you what to do, but it often feels like we don't have much of a choice at the same time. Like we could choose to resist and suffer. uh yeah. Yep. So that's it. So that's it. That's what I'm going through this week. Or have been for the last couple of weeks.
I know that we got a lot of some questions from some of you on the call today, and of course, you do not have to share it here if you don't want to, but I'm just opening up that in case any of you that have kind of been emailing wanted to talk about any of those things today. And we also have our Wisdom in the Weave segment, I guess, that we've been doing live. So we go live about 5 days a week on Instagram um, at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. And we are working on streaming on more platforms, and we record it and we post it to our public Facebook, but we also on Tuesdays we go live a second time, and we'll like answer questions, and we'll take questions from the public, but also like members obviously can ask. Um, but this is your also space to ask those questions too. And in the meantime, my cousin bought me a sweatshirt that says Hex the Patriarchy. And even though she doesn't know my perspective on hexes, I still appreciated the effort that my family makes to buy me witchy things, even if they don't, So it was fun.
I think
Anybody?
this is probably the quietest Sass we've ever had. But at the same time, it is not uncommon for the week that we've had. This has been pretty consistent for most of the meetings and stuff that we've had this week. Is this just like, it seems like a lot of people are either introspective or struggling with engagement in some way. It's interesting. It's interesting when we're all going through the same thing, down to the fact that usually we have at least like 5 to 10 witches that join 15 minutes before Sass even starts. And we didn't have anyone. It was really, really interesting. So, hi, Lurker.
Hello. For me this week, have really struggled with the articulation and just speaking what I'm thinking and making it linear and making it make sense. So I've been a little more introverted because of that.
That's a really good way of explaining that. Struggling with articulating. Yeah. Which makes content creation very difficult, by the way, everybody.
I'm from Massachusetts, so Lurker, I always want to like say like Lurka with the Boston accent. So if you want to like add an A, just
Oh,
the way
please
that you
do. I
spelled
love it.
Lurka.
I like
Sorry.
it.
All right, let's see. We have some hands up. And oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. It's like I've never been on Zoom before. Wit.
I don't know why I also just sat there like, oh, I gotta wait to be called on instead of just being like, I think I'm next, but that's where we're sitting right now. I know that I'm not the only one in the community too, but I've had a real hard time with sleep over like the past week and a half of, like not being able to fall asleep or waking up a lot or not sleeping, fully. And I keep meaning to look into like the astrological stuff of what's the happening with the astrological stuff and if that could be influencing it, but I've kind of started feeling like this is an energy thing, not necessarily like my partner's been asking me like, what are you stressed about? And I said I really don't have anything that like is like a top of mind that I'm like uber stressed about. And, there's might always be something that's lurking underneath, hiding in the shadows somewhere. There's always that possibility. But I feel like it's more of like how my body is reacting to like an energy shift in some way. And like knowing that at least, a handful of other people have had sleep issues as well too, like just it feels even more. And like I see, oh, look at that. So even more people like that just kind of reinforces like tis the energy right now of hip hip hooray, which I know is leading into my like playing into my meh feeling as well too, It's just meh. It's not good, it's not bad, just meh. All right, Mumble Fairy.
Sorry, technical issues there. Uh, yeah, my family and I have been like sick all week, but at the same time, I haven't been sleeping. I've been super introspective. But then I guess I've also just felt like my body needed to be resting more. Like, even though the sickness was hitting my kids and it was inevitable that it was going to hit me, that like I still managed to avert the worst of the sickness. My kids were much more sick than I had been. And I think it's like, I kind of just felt like this kind of shift this week at the same time. And so it's almost like my body is telling me, you need to rest because you're kind of preparing for something. So I've been just, even with like journaling and anything like that, that I've been kind of been trying to do more frequently. I had even kind of cooled on that and just not only resting my physical body, but resting my mental self as well, and just letting that, chill and being okay with that. Because sometimes I think it's really easy to get frustrated and to expect myself to be productive physically, spiritually, mentally. I need to do all the things and take care of my kids when sometimes I need to learn to single task. And so this week it was all about taking care of my family, taking care of myself, and just also just reserving my energy to like prepare, for whatever is shifting. So that's kind of my thought. I don't see any other hand. Oh, Maria.
Thanks. One thing that got highlighted for me, maybe over the last month is because of social like media, that I'm connected with people from my past that I don't necessarily talk to anymore, but we're just connected like on social. And just like some of it's always like amazes me when the topics that we're doing, like maybe in our journaling or the things that come up when like other people start posting about it and like they're going through their awakening or whatever. And I feel like even though these are people that like I've been connected with throughout my 43 years, we don't necessarily talk anymore, that we're like kind of going through this similar experience. And just even some of like the words that they choose in their like messaging will like blow my mind because it will be something that I had just talked about or something like that. So I just thought that was pretty cool, and it was like highlighted for me in particular with like a few people. um and yeah, I don't know this is like. I don't know. Sometimes when I say things to my guides, I literally hear them laughing because I'm like, what the, why are we waking up at 4 a.m.? This is some bullshit. Like, I like to sleep. I don't like to be awake. I do like to be awake, but if you ask me if you're like, pick one, I'd be like, sleep. So, um, I just like, I need a lot of support. I have to support myself in a certain way to like be alert and awake and not feel tired during the day. But anyhow, but yeah, like it's like I open my eyes and I don't even have to look at the clock. I know it's like 4 a.m. for something. And that's been happening for a while. this morning it was a little bit better. It was like 6 something. So yeah, I'm a Pisces, shifts, with Pisces season and eclipse season. It's interesting, like the energy for me is just like it's an energy of change, of like, but still not necessarily a slap in your face of what the answers are. It's still like which I fucking hate that, because that's been my like whole life. Like you can sense it, like the energy, is about to shift. You get like little clues, but it's not like a slap in the face. And I'm like, I just want it. Like, please just put, like my tarot cards, and I have funny relationship too, because it's just like, no, you only get this much information. I'm like, okay. So just learning to like flow with that. I think I guess what I'm doing is um as I'm like learning, more about, I say, engaging differently with how I'm manifesting is really mostly about releasing resistance to certain things, to like allow that flow. And it's really mostly about like not doing things rather than like trying to do, and like finding the balance between that, like finding the balance of like, okay, I'm getting this information, feeling this action energy, but it's feeling like, when like things are just like that, everyone, like you feel like that busy, and like everything around you feels like busy, and I'm like not wanting to engage with that type of like busyness per se, but because I work like a 9 to 5 job, it's like that's an interesting dynamic. Because when that like happens, and I'm like, I don't really want to be doing this, but I have a mortgage. So like right now, this is what we're trying to figure this out. Um, but I just feel it's a lot about just how I engage, and the way that I feel like I want to show up. So that means about like how I engage with stress, and like my anxiety, and just shifting the way I engage with those things, because that feels like the only thing I can really do right now when I don't, and like maybe prepare as much as I prepare. And when I mean that, like that's also shifted too, because preparedness, Maria in her 20s, used to mean like the things that I needed to do to get to the thing that I thought I needed to get to. And it was very intellectual, and it was a lot about survival and thinking I needed to reach a certain point in my job and a pay, and something to like, then I would be happy, and then I wouldn't feel stressed, and then I wouldn't feel comfortable. And I realized that that's not actually how this incarnation is going to go for me. It's like, it's really just trying to figure out like truly following like the excitement when it presents itself. So not so I mean, there's no resistance to like going out and searching for it and like looking into things, but just being like energetically, intellectually and energetically and physically prepared to like meet the excitement when it comes. So I can like follow those breadcrumbs or follow that excitement, because that seems the only thing that is kind of revealed to me like at this point. Um, and I feel like I will get more information. Things will change in the way that I'm looking for them to shift, um, to kind of get out of like the hamster wheel type of feeling that I feel like I was in a lot of like my earlier part of my life, you know? And it's interesting because of all the people in the world that like are still, like there's such, I love all the conversations that are happening, and like, the TikTok ban, like that. I love like the conversations that like that's bringing up, and like those types of things. But it's interesting. All of that is really interesting to me. So that was all that was in my brain. Thank you for listening. Anybody want to share or have a question? We have another Wit.
I'll jump on with your sharing what's on your mind bandwagon. But I more so to be like, I don't know, validate you or say yes, right there with you of I can't remember if I shared last week or not, but like I had a recent shift or like I don't know, a realization working through some shadow work, a download, whatever you want to call it, and just of I felt a lot of like I'd been feeling a lot of resistance for, you know, my job, living situation, not wanting, I want to be able to be witchy 100% of my life at all times, and I can't always, I mean, I am witchy, but I have to also mainstream, go to work and pay bills and stuff like that. And, you know, realized I was spending a lot of time with that resistance with it, even though I didn't want to be. And so I've had a shift and that same kind of feelings of like preparedness of no, I am working on becoming prepared for this change that's coming, for this thing that I don't even know what it is necessarily. I mean, I've got some ideas, but right there with you too, Marie, of like, give me just a little bit more universe. No, okay. But becoming comfortable with just sitting here and knowing that it's coming and like that ability to fully feel confident with that and not have like reserves or like yes there is still some fear there but it's like fear that is I know that yeah that's going to be scary but I also know that I'm going to be able to work through it. I know the universe has my back. I know my community has my back. um it's a different type of preparedness and a different type of like you know um I don't it's hard to put in words because well English and the meh feeling but it's a really I don't know, it's a cool place to be too of like, yeah, I'm confident and like steady. Kind of like the biggest word that comes to mind is just like I'm steady with with where we're at right now. Um and kind of going from there. So sum that up. Right at the same place, Maria. Feel you. All right, Stephanie.
Gee, I hit that like 4 times. So this was kind of on my mind, and I touched on it when I jumped on here with Jen Marie. But what you just loved me a softball that I guess I'm going to have to pick up now. Um, it's that same thing about like owning my witchy side more in the general world, and I'm kind of finding myself being forced into that at work. I made a post in our Facebook group, I don't even remember, a month or two ago that, a friend of mine had been warned off from hanging out with me for the safety of her eternal soul. And I was like, I've made it. I've really made it, and it was funny at first. But since then, the pitchforks are out in where I work. I work in a solo salons, and I don't know if anybody knows what those are, but there's about a little over 30 salon studios in my building. We're all independent. I have my own little studio and I work alone, and it's lovely. But there's still an awful lot of predominantly women. And it has become this interesting situation. There's 2 hallways, right? There's the left hallway and the right hallway, and we call it left side energy and right side energy, and I'm on the right side. But the left side hallway is coming for pitchforks for not only myself but a few other people in the building that they deem much in need of Jesus, and are very vocal about it to the landlord. It's really reached fever pitch. I am finding that I have everything I need to manage this situation. It so far I'm very blessed to It's not gonna affect, my ability to work or anything like that. Like I know it does for some people. It's been fine, but I've watched some other people really, really struggle with that. And I've never, instead of tamping myself down like Stephanie would have maybe a year ago for this program, it is my my level of almost petty has gotten, is raised. I'm really stepping into that this is who I am. If it's the t-shirts or the jewelry that I wear, it's the armor that I put on when I go in, which is for me is it helps me feel more confident instead of letting them really beat me down and make me hide. And I am fully embracing that. I think I've learned so much in this group in the last year that has allowed me to be able to let that energy go on around me and not let it truly, stop me from being who I am. And so Whit, when you were saying that, you wanted to step into that 24 hours, I'm finding that I've been poked into that and I'm here for it, right? I love it. But I don't know if anybody else has faced these kinds of things in their professional life and their family life and mundane life that I don't know, hearing about it might help me a little bit, like a little bit more confidence that I need because I'm pretty good with it, but it's new to me. And so this is the first time that I'm working through something like that. And I don't know if anybody else has really had to face something like that, but that's where I am right now. I don't see any other hands up, but I don't know if that's my phone or not.
That's okay. I have my hand up, but someone else just had their hand up too. Was it Dan? Did maybe?
I had Diana.
Oh, Diana.
I had my hand up, but if you're going to weigh in to Stephanie, you should go first because I was going to completely change.
Okay, I will pass it to you afterwards. So Stephanie, I was able to meet these two awesome women this weekend. And they introduced themselves to me as lesbians. And we were talking kind of about this. Well, they knew I was a witch. They shared with me that they were lesbian. And we were talking about like community living and all of these things. And um, I was like, well, this will all work, but we need to do shadow work. This is why. And they were like, well, when are you running for president? And I'm like, well, but why I say this is what ended up, why I guess from when I started my divination practice, of course, there are times where I just feel maybe it's not safe. But when I feel that I am like my physical safety isn't in danger, that I share certain things because it's always like that one person who then wants to like pull me aside and like share something with me about like their experience. And when I was talking with these two women, I was like, really? If like all the witches, your community, like if we all came together, we would not be the minority anymore. And the reason I said that, I don't necessarily have an answer because the people that are going to do that is, I don't really think we're going to change their minds, but it's like where's the balance? Like where's the balance with it? Meaning not looking to change anybody's mind, but just want the respect and dignity to make my own decisions as an adult without anybody like telling me what to do. And so the where I get like I just like, it's just where I get the pull to speak out is just because I know that there's people that will then find me and be like, I actually feel more aligned with what you're saying, the way that like you are doing it. And so I find that when I do speak out or when I do speak up, even though it might be hard, that I do it because of the people that will reach out, and then I'm like just creating that bigger community. So I don't know like if that's helpful, but I mean, and at work, like I'm vocal and out at like the corporate office, but not to we support like other people in the community, and they're Christian. And I know that some of them will like be praying for me, or some of them may not even want to work with me if they knew, if they knew that I was a witch. So, and I don't know. And maybe someday I'll dip my toe in to like do that. Um, but I totally feel you. And I think the only thing that one of the things that I've always just felt really strongly about is to find the spaces where I do want to speak up and speak out, so that just like we've done here, that people will find us and connect with us. And then you just have this support system and this group, and it's bigger. And then it's just like, okay, it doesn't feel as scary, when you've got that support and that community with you. All right. Diana, I want to pass it off to you, and it's okay if we go back and forth, but I want to pass it off to you. So you had your hand up too.
That's okay. I've totally lost my train of thought. It's derailed, and it will come when it comes back. I will.
It will come back.
It'll come back. I'll raise my hand.
All right. Petra.
So I was like setting up my phone in its little like thing so I can actually like let go of it. It takes a second. I guess I wanted to kind of weigh in because when you were talking, Stephanie, I mean, as someone who's an ex-evangelical, I find like Christians fascinating. Personally, I'm just like so interesting. Because like I definitely fuck with Jesus, but I just don't fuck with like the church in general. Like, what's not to love? Jesus was a good dude. He was anti-capitalist. He was like all of these things, and I'm like, yes, you are kind of why I came out of Christianity. But I guess one of the things that came to mind, and then I need to put it in the chat, a little like link to like a Reddit thread, because I was like, I don't know, like I think Jesus was kind of a witch. So there's kind of a whole thread there. And then I was like, I'm sure I'm not the first person who had that idea. So I'll just like leave the Reddit thread in the chat if you kind of want to see like a little conversation about that. But like he definitely like performed acts of sorcery. Like they call them miracles, but like there's, kind of that element of like, if any of us turned water into wine, people would be like, what? But he gets to do it and they're like, yay, it's a miracle. It's like there's something in Christianity about the way that they're given frameworks around things of like, because we say this is a miracle, it's okay, but if other people do it, it's dangerous and unsafe and whatnot. And I like to always bring things with Christians, I'm gonna be really honest, like back to Jesus, because that's supposed to be the foundation of their faith, right? Like that's essentially the New Testament is what separates them from Jewish people. And their views on Jesus also separate them from Muslims because of Muhammad and the prophets, and like other faith traditions, other monotheistic religions recognize Jesus as a prophet. They just don't recognize him as like the Son of God incarnate, that kind of a thing. So there's like these delineations between those, where I think because Christianity has been a tool of the state, has specifically been that like they're often like ideologically blocked from seeing other perspectives. I don't think that often when I have conversations with Christians now, I think it's always important to be like, we actually agree on more than we disagree. Like the foundation of your faith, like I fuck with the dude who made it. I think that everything that he said is gravy. There's a lot of their I would say more like state sanctioned beliefs, like against like queer people, against, you know, justifying slavery and justifying all the, like, you know, things that happened post, like, and so I think sometimes having conversations with people and being like, hey, like, we actually are more alike than you think, um is can be helpful, because it's really hard for people to be afraid of you or to see you as a threat when you actually like can be like, look at all this common ground we have, and not in a fawning way. I don't like, please don't do that to your nervous system, but like in a like um I they're not going to see the similarities, but if you can bring your humanity and those things into that, oftentimes their nervous systems are like, wait, like this person's actually a safe person, and that can kind of start to, in their body, they might not even be consciously aware of it, like shift some of that stuff. And I've had a lot of people who were like, you know, kind of like, you're going to hell, and I'm like, tell me more about that, why? Like, you know, and when you're just not like, you know, because I think also lots of times people will like kind of throw their skip, like the thing that they're the most terrified of, like Christians especially. I think anybody who accuses someone else of something, they tell you what they're afraid of when they're making those accusations, right? Like, you're afraid of going to hell, you're afraid of not whatever. My belief system actually encompasses a way that like you're not separated from your loved ones when you die, like you're not like punished forever, like, you know, there's not this like there's actually free will, because really, if you're holding hell over someone, can they actually have free will to decide if they want to believe in something or not? No, because that's coercion. Like that's the ultimate kind of coercive act, is like, I'm going to essentially bully you into whatever. Which is interesting, because I feel like Jesus didn't really talk about hell, which is also something I am always like, this is so intriguing to me that you're so focused on this, when like your main dude is like not into that. Like, that's not what he was talking about. He was actually talking about lots of like socialist principles, which, like, you know, maybe don't use that word, they might not like that and call you a commie. But like, I also think that like, as someone who's like struggled with mean girl culture, which is generally what happens when it's like you have, you know, women who have been marinating in patriarchy and misogyny, and thinking that like we're each other's enemies instead of patriarchy and misogyny, because like that little like turnaround is really helpful to the systems at large, is realizing that like most people who kind of go after other people as a threat are actually like incredibly terrified, and they're like quite scared, and they're quite probably feeling very cowardly, and this is this like misguided attempt at feeling safe, right? Which is banana pants to me, because like, what a way to set yourself up for failure. I need to everybody to agree with me, or else I'm not safe. And you're like, well, then you're never going to be safe, because like, hello, like the world is other people having other opinions, but that happens a lot. So oh, I think Bridget, you're unmuted. Sorry. But yeah,
Have a hand up? Okay.
is any of that helpful, Stephanie? Or like, I would love to hear more of your thoughts, and kind of like, if any of that felt supportive, or if you have more specific questions.
Yeah, and I always love what you have to say, Petra, because I love this the spin you put that on that with, you know, the mean girl culture in there. This has been going on and off for some time, and the main ringleader, I have tried to speak to in that way, and it was twisted and turned into something completely. So I think that avenue for me is not one that I can take without just setting myself up for more of it. But I am watching me and the others like me in my space that are you know, getting the pitchforks, maintain who we are. And we've even gotten together and done some work on, you know, operating from a place of like love and supporting each other and not from a place of fear. And it is definitely showing where like the ringleader, if you will, had really created a group around her that is dissipating, right? The longer we just remain who we truly are, that group is falling apart around her. And I think you're really right with like her being, and I say her meaning because there really is like someone, running the show there, is fearful, right? And she's just trying to get all those others around her, and it's crumbling. And all we have to do is be ourselves. And the gift in that, though, right? Because there always, I mean, very rarely isn't one. I mean, there are things that don't bring gifts, of course, but like, is that I have really gotten to a point where I'm like, no, this is who I am. Like, this is who I am, and I'm okay with it. And so I'm grateful for that because I was raised in such a strict religion myself, and just the way the world and politics are ourselves or currently, I've kind of kept it on the down low. But what I'm finding as the more that I lean into who I am, my chair is all of a sudden full of clients that are just like me, right? And I'm finding more community and things to do in the community just by just really truly leaning into who I am and not, letting those people make me think that I can't take up space as well. So yeah, you really nailed a lot of it, I think, about like how she might be feeling. And that reminder is always good for me. So it's always helpful, right? Because it's easy to slip into that energy of like, they're just terrible people, and but when I see her as a fearful, hurt person under the patriarchy, like, then it's like, oh yeah, okay, I can still maintain who I am. I can keep this going and stay true to myself. And it'll all work out. It is working out. It's just the first time that I was just kind of like, wow, these people will really come for you. They will like really come for you. But I've been lucky. I'm in New York. I'm in a relatively safe place for that, so I feel very, very blessed. I know that hasn't been the case for everybody, and I think I saw in the comments that some people have really, had some loss because of just maintaining, their belief system. And it's unfortunate that it has to be that way, because really I just would like to believe what I believe and let them believe what they would believe, and we can all, work together in that and find common ground somewhere, just like to your point. So yeah, that was my long answer of yes, that was helpful. Thank you, Petra.
You're welcome. I just want to make sure that I touched on things that were actually pertinent, because sometimes our brain is like, big systems view, and then I was like, I don't know if this actually helps you in specific. So thank you for the feedback. And I'm going to give it to you, Maria.
Thank you. One thing that someone posted something on our Facebook page, and I mentioned something to Jen Marie, and today I was watching the Long Island Medium on she was being interviewed, Teresa Caputo, is it? And she said from her words that she for her perspective, what she only communicates to spirits that walk in God's white light. And she kind of went on to say some other things and some of that, her perspective. So I was like, okay. But I like went to the comments section, and was like, well, that's not, everyone was saying, well, you can't be, because then mediumship is not, sorry, Dusty, mediumship, talking about mediumship and how that's, not following Jesus, that's not following God, and blah, 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 on and on. And just, what is like, when people say, like when someone says, it's just so weird to me now, because it's like when someone says that they're one religion or another, it's like a lot of assumptions get made that like I know how you worship or I know how you practice, right? So like when you tell someone you're a witch, they really they can have absolutely no idea of what you believe or how you practice because it's an umbrella term, right? And what they're reacting on is like what they've seen in the movies and what they've been told by other people. And that's where these groups of people that I've interacted with, Stephanie, like you're describing in Petro, like that mean kind of like that mean girl mentality. I actually feel a little bit bad for them because I've had the opportunity to connect with myself and realize what feels true to me. And a lot of people are just following somebody else. And I'm like, you're following somebody else. Someone else is kind of like dictating how you should worship and or how you should act, who you should like and who you shouldn't like. And that's gotta cause a lot of internal, I think that it's gotta, for some people, cause a lot of internal turmoil because it's like just that kind of sheep, like you're just like following along, but you're not, and I'm not saying this for everyone, I'm trying not to generalize. It's just like when a lot of times when having these conversations, it's like people even haven't like really thought about it or talked about it. Or when someone says like, you're a witch, I want to say, but what does that mean to you? Right? Like, what do you think that means? What do you think I'm doing? And when you had said like, that doesn't sound like that woman is like open for a conversation, like if you just said like, could you explain just like, what do you think is going on over here? And so, because like, really, I just want to help the planet, support other people, like, you know, I don't know. Do you think like, well, Stephanie, do you feel like that a lot of assumptions are getting made about like what is actually happening?
Oh yeah, and it's just about, I mean, and it's just about everything. I don't think a conversation would save it. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a girl wearing a Michael Jackson t-shirt that was told it was satanic and she couldn't wear it in there. I don't know if it was a Thriller shirt or something of that sort. So every little thing, somebody had a cinnamon broom in the fall, and that was marked by like, complained about, even though it was in her own space and not it, so it doesn't, I'm losing my train of thought, but
Yeah.
yeah, she will just find it no matter how what it is. So I could, go tell her I'm really Glenda the Good Witch, right? And pink is my favorite and it's all sparkles and fairy dust. And it would still be negative. It would just there I have no desire even at this point, having learned what I've learned, to try and change minds or educate in that particular person. And there's a lot of people that I will would love to have conversations about what that means to me, what that word means to me. But there's sometimes, I think, with people, you've got to also recognize when it's just not a good idea, right? Everything gets
Yeah.
weaponized, and I think that that's the situation. I'm figuring that out, 2 years in, that it doesn't matter like how much I were to explain myself or try to help her understand it, because it is not specifically laid out in a particular book, then it is wrong no matter what.
Hmm.
So
Right. In a book that the translations are not correct, but that's another story. I remember like, I remember I was in this class and it was called Myth, Magic, and Mystery. And I was like about 30 something at that time. And I had been doing tarot cards and things like that and struggling with that a little bit, like really wanting to dive into all of those things, but my family was Catholic. And I remember I took this class and I had an awesome teacher, and the class was called Myth, Magic, and Mystery. It was a humanities course. And she was saying, well, the myth stories in the Bible, and I'll never forget sitting in my chair and her saying that, it's like time stopped for a minute. And I'm like, did she just call the Bible a myth? Because I never considered it before. Like it was never I had never had the opportunity to at that till that point to like hear that. And I was like, wow. And it just like, but I was of like open to it. And it kind of probably started maybe the deconstruction like that for me. But I remember it was just shocking to hear because all around me where I grew up was Catholics from a lot from either Irish or like Italian descent. And that is what I was surrounded by. But I do think that you can be Christian and we have a lot of pagan Christians. Like I know that Lurka has had their hand in the comments, like, and has, shared about that too. And it's just like, I don't know, is it really about being Christian or are you just an asshole? I don't. But what is hard is when you feel it's like feeling that unsafety piece or like feeling that ganged up against or just like you said you don't need to be friends, but that's where people have it wrong. They like that it's not right to treat other people that way. But Lurka, pass it to you.
Oh, I'm definitely just an asshole. I'm just teasing. I love these conversations. But then I have like weeks like this where I'm really tired and my physical body takes over. So my ADHD is making my brain just like kind of bounce around really like aggressively. And so I find myself wanting to weigh in and then it just kind of like falls off, like I said, the linear thought. And two, there's this, because I am a Christo pagan, there's this like need to kind of like protect myself. So like knowing that like not I'm not criticizing, but knowing that Sass is like public is or will be posted publicly keeps me too from kind of going into the woo-woo side of being a Christo pagan because well, for one, it's a very kind of lonely and private practice because it's out there. It's nothing like Christianity. And it has taken me many, 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 many years to be able to make my Christ consciousness and my pagan side make sense because I wouldn't align with it so harmoniously if there wasn't truth to both sides for my spirit, right? But like I said earlier, I'm struggling to articulate. So I'm like, I keep hoping that this subject comes up more, um, especially when we're having like group chat, like just hanging out, body doubling and stuff just kind of comes up organically. And I'm hoping it like just pops up when I'm like having a better, physical brain day, because I'm always happy to like answer questions and give my perspective and stuff. But yeah, it's hard to just kind of like start in on it, It's easier for me to answer questions and things like that.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
So I don't practice Reiki anymore, but well, I do like my own version of it now, but when I did get my attunement, one of the deities that was like present there was where it was Jesus, and I had and others, but I had that was just like a really cool experience. And so it's just I do still feel that that energy like is like to a guide in my life, but like I'm fully, you know, also engaging in my witchcraft practice. And so the deconstruction, like what with Heather, what you were saying, like going through the deconstruction journey over the like really the foundations program is
Right.
where I was able to like resolve like within myself, like if I had questions or like, like yeah, like you said, like making sense of it for you, of where that felt like where you just feel it and it's like you feel that it's right for you.
And I can like definitely say that the core of it is like we talk about Bashar a lot. And I think the reason I'm so drawn to his teachings is because it puts it in very plain language. So, like, you know how he talks about permission slips? Um, like that's kind of what I agree with. And my permission slip almost is like I said, Christ consciousness with like this pagan practice. So in my mind, believing that all consciousness is valid and it's really the same, it's everything and it's the same thing and it's all connected. I call that God and I call that Jesus and angels and so on and so forth, right? And that is the core of how it makes sense to me, but there's obviously so much more that goes into that.
Yeah. I feel like this, it's my perspective and I've talked about it before, but this whole like with people talking about like feeling like we're going backwards, with some of the political things that are happening and things like that. And my perspective is I feel like that there's such a bigger shift coming that it's just like the resistance and like the hanging on to what's left of the old way of thinking. Um,
Mm.
that's just what I feel. And I don't know when, but even the children, when I'm interacting with children now, the way that they think and act, it's just it seems like different. Like they're just more, to me, they just feel more like aware, and like
I
connected
call it
in a way that's
emotionally
different.
evolved.
What was it?
With my children, I explain it that they're like more emotionally evolved kind of right out the gate.
Yeah. And Bashar talked a little bit about that too, about that the children incarnating now is different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We're just wait for the aliens to come down and tell everybody what's been going on. Maybe they're already here. I think they are. And when I mean aliens, that could be a variety of beings, not just like I like the green men, but others too. I know, been reading the chat too. Yes, 100% about the kids. It is hard when there's negativity. We've talked about, I don't know if we've talked about it in a minute, but some of us have gone through kind of read and maybe we'll get back to um a collective reading on it if people feel, but Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, PhD, is just some of the way a lot of the ways that we kind of had like the way that we interact as a community here um was inspired by that book. And it just can give you tools to have like difficult conversations and remain in like alliance with your truest self without it getting escalated, and still being able to feel like good about standing in your truth. but not having to have necessarily like a heated argument with somebody, just ways of kind of communication that just can be respectful of everyone's perspectives. So if anyone, I just mention it just in case anyone got pinged by that. Anyone else? I know, I'm sure lots of you had thoughts about that kind of discussion, so we can just hold the space in case you feel like anybody wants to add anything, or if you have any questions, or if you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Or just feeling whatever feelings are coming up. Wit?
I just wanted to, I don't know, express my gratitude for being able to have these conversations, and for those who do still have, you know, that, I don't know, belief or that ability to kind of connect the basis of the religions to kind of paganism as well too, because when I started, I was, you know, working through some religious trauma and deconstructing my religious training. And I was so much of like against anything that was like resembling like Christianity. And so through the years, having those conversations with people like Lurka, now see, I threw an A on it because Maria says, put an A on it. It's really helped me like deconstruct more and kind of see that, you know, it's of my belief too, that like, it's all how you talk about the same energy and the same thing. It's just giving it labels. And so, yeah, just wanted to express my gratitude. And also, you know, if anybody else kind of has those feelings of resistance as well too, you know, it's those feelings are valid, and like looking into the reason behind those as well too. It's a great place to find some shadow work. So Renee.
Oh, I'm late because I screwed up my time, but also so I kind of missed out on the earlier conversation, but can we talk about the devil? Because as someone who was terrorized by the devil when I was a child, I have very different feelings about that now. Um, which there's a Liz Phair song lyric where she says, no need for Lucifer to fall if you learn to keep his mouth shut, which I totally identify with. But I also just remember things coming up in like Sunday school when I was very young that I just did not agree with. And I remember one of the things was, um, you know, Lucifer got in big trouble. It was the why should a, son of the light bow before a son of clay, or whatever that, part was. And I was kind of like, yeah, why would, I mean, it's, but I also was kind of a contrary child too. Like I didn't want to come back from Oz, why would I want to go back to Kansas, but I don't know. It is interesting to just have different perspective on some of those things now. Uh, the more you actually, well, like Maria had kind of mentioned like the mythology of it. And I had a high school art teacher that was very into like world mythology. And she'd be like, you know, there's flood myths before the Bible. Like basically any like major event in the Bible has already taken place in another culture's kind of foundational mythology. And so I'd thought about it a lot then, but also, yeah, it's just, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I thought maybe I'd open up a conversation about the devil because he's not that scary. And I'm on my phone, so it'll take me a minute to untap myself because it's a little, here I go. And I think Ezra's up.
I love how you said the devil. I've been like kind of zoning in and out. Like I felt like uh there was almost like a tap when nonviolent communication came up for me. And then I was just like, I was not paying enough attention to the conversation. I was like definitely like just like back and forth. So, but then the way you said devil just like really caught my attention. So, it reminded me of like that movie, like gosh, the video game. It's like a video game Pixar movie, whatever it's called. And he calls him. There's a character that's the devil, and he calls himself Satine instead of Satan. Um, but I really like that idea because when you think about the way, at least that evangelical Christianity and any type of like Orthodox, because like I'm Jewish and the ultra Orthodox people like operate in pretty much the exact same way. Authoritarianism, that's basically just it. They operate very similarly. And so when you think about like this character who's evil because he rebelled, like you're really not given much information about like what he rebelled against. It's really just that he stepped away from God. And they create a lot of stories around that. And it kind of gives to me like I really like literary analysis. And like in the story, that idea, if you look at like how evangelical, like nationalist, authoritarian, like sometimes like fascist, religious practices like completely are about obedience. Like I've actually been reading a lot about that. Like, and it's all about like you are good if you are obedient and you are bad if you are disobedient. And so that kind of like training people to be docile, to obey, like without question, and then you're good. That really makes me question like what the purpose of Satan is in that story. He like is just a symbol to me, like he's become kind of more of a symbol of rebellion against authoritarianism to me. And that kind of like is very interesting. It's a very interesting dichotomy from what we were brought up to consider, that because we were told he is evil, and we weren't, and then we pretty much associated everything that's bad with him. Like if you killed someone, it was big, like there are people that are like, oh well, if you did a bad thing, it's because the devil's in you, that kind of thing. But we weren't like as far as I know anyway, it doesn't seem like there's really that much information about what the actual conflict was. And it seems to me more just as like even his name like means adversary. It just means like against God, who, and again, like is the authoritarian and in this like story. So that I really think that's that's interesting. Now everyone's just like weighing about the devil. I like that. Yeah, that's my only thought about it is it growing up and realizing who the people that were trying to make me obey and then that kind of thing. Growing up in the South, I was very entrenched in Christianity, even though I wasn't Christian myself. It's just given me a very different perspective as well. So I think Maria was next. So
Thank you. Thanks, Ezra. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was gonna bring that up earlier, and I didn't, and because my mind just went on a different track with it. But like I had felt a ping or like a little while ago to like explore working with Lucifer as a deity. And at the time I just didn't like have enough information and but I was like, can we just put it on hold and like we can I circle back with you at a later time. Um, you know, and that's kind of where I kind of left things. But you know, and again, like talking about these things, it's nothing to do with Christianity. It's for me, it's like completely outside of that perspective of on things. But like some of the witches that I've learned from, you know, again, like using kind of discernment on TikTok. There are a few witches that I do really follow and listen to for like information, people that have been practicing a lot longer than I do and have done like different research on various things. Um, because I'm like a Cliff's Notes person. I like to go to the person that's done the really deep dives and into you know, researching a particular thing. And I'm like, okay, give me the info, you know. And so, you know, one person is just like, you know, Lucifer, you know, just really gets a kind of a bad rap. You know, getting all these kind of things put on them that, you know, maybe don't really belong to them. So I love the conversation. I love like talking about that. And you know, if any of you are feeling like that time when I was sitting in class and someone said, you know, the Bible's a myth and I almost fell off my chair, like I also like hold space, you know, for that, you know, to like going through that, like this process, like talking about these things from like maybe a different perspective than maybe you've had the opportunity to like talk about in a group before. But I'm also like, I'm totally down. This is why one of the reasons why I'm here. I like absolutely love these conversations, like sharing space and like I like live for this. This is just this is like my highest excitement at like this moment. So um and I just wanted to share too, like I would there's a museum, Elizabeth Gardner Museum. Do I always say it right? No, it's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. And this weekend I was at the Boston Public Library. Um, and they both have Christian artwork inspired and pagan. And it was like back in the day, because when the predominant belief was paganism, like the early Christian influences have a lot of paganism. I think we all kind of know that because that's the only way they could get people to conform in a way, you know, because so it had to have like these pagan elements to it so it would be familiar to people. Um, but in the Boston Public Library, there's this floor and each wall is dedicated. One is paganism, this beautiful mural, and one's Christianity and one's Judaism. And I just kind of like sat in this room and I'm like, what a beautiful like mixture, you know, of all of these things of just of represented like in one room. And I just had like a moment and like, you know, just sat like to looking at the wall that was dedicated to paganism. You know, in this like, you know, Boston is, you know, a big city, but again, just a lot around me was, you know, just that predominantly like Christian perspective. And I'm just like, I don't know, I just love seeing that was just represented there and it's been there for all this time, you know, I don't know, just was cool. All right. Who is next? Sorry, I keep hitting the chat when I keep to hit participants. And Stephanie. And then Petra has a weigh-in as well.
I just have a quick one. I heard an interesting perspective on Satine from very early on in the Bible, right in the beginning, the Adam and Eve and the serpent is the devil. And it was a kind of a flip take on it, right? That the devil says, or the snake says, if you eat this apple, you're going to get knowledge, you know, whereas God is saying, if you don't eat the apple, if you do, I'm going to cast you out of here forever, right? And being raised the way that I was, I just accepted that, you know, the snake is bad, God is good. And then somebody said, well, wait a minute, you know, the snake just says you will have knowledge, right? That's all that he says. You will have knowledge if you eat this apple. And then God is more of the trickster in the story, right? Because he knows they're going to eat the apple. He tells them not to. It's kind of like this game, you know, and then they're going to be punished anyways. And I just found that a super interesting take. Is it the Gnostics that think that thought that maybe the whole thing was like a flip, that Satan was really the truth teller, right? Like I loved Ezra's take that it was a symbol of resistance, right? Because all the snake said was, you will have knowledge, right? If you eat this, you will know things. And I just found as soon as somebody presented that to me, like all the cobwebs kind of fell away about the rest of it. And it just piqued my curiosity. I'm like, how have I been looking at these stories in the way that they were, told to me as a child, or how if I were to read it again on my own as if it were brand new knowledge, how would I perceive the snake as opposed to God knowing what I know now? I'm not sure if I'm babbling at this point, but I just found that was really, really interesting that, all he said was, you will have knowledge, and that is all. And then it was demonized from that point on. And that's all that I have to say about that. But I just really loved that perspective on that story. And that is,
Thank you. We
I
have
think Petra's next.
yeah, pass it over to Petra and Renee after that.
I just had wanted to add, like when Ezra was talking about kind of the function of Satan, there's also if someone does actual like kind of theological research, there's a lot to say that like there are different entities that have all been grouped under like Satan, and it's like, the serpent, the like Lucifer, morning star, like that these are actually like, if you go back in translation wise and look at older texts and whatnot, that these are actually like separate things, but they call, which is also plays into kind of like the vilification of a alternative perspective kind of theory. So I just think that's very interesting, where it's like, okay, when I started doing more like biblical history research and kind of looking at that stuff and learning more about it, I was like, that's so interesting. And I think it's also important to always like remember that Christianity has been used as kind of like a way, belief sanctioned by the state for control in terms of like imperialism and colonialism. I don't think that invalidates like the faith itself. I think I just want to be super clear about that, is that like it's hard, it's very challenging to separate like the state sanctioned violence of a religion from the religion itself, but those things are in fact different, even if they're often enmeshed. So for anyone who's like, but I believe in this stuff, it's like, I want to be really clear that I can't speak for anyone else, but I specifically am not being like, you're a violent person or your beliefs are violent. I'm like, no, the state has utilized that faith to commit violence and to justify it. Like that, I think, is an important distinction. It also doesn't like my dad is a Christian, and so sometimes him and I've been talking for a while, but like we would kind of get in a little bit of like I don't know, at an impasse, because he would often kind of be like, well, like, what can I do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, if you're a part of a system that harms people, then like, probably you need to try to fix it. Like, I don't know. Like, that was just always the thing where I was like, this is like, and it's honestly something where like, that's part of why I had to leave the church. I was like, I can heal myself, or I can spend and expend my entire life force trying to fight against these very deeply entrenched intergenerational wounds that function in Christianity because of Rome taking over it like thousands of years ago now. And I was like, I don't have that. I actually just need to live my life, and I need to figure out what my path is. And but I still have those conversations with my Christian friends, because they're like, this is the thing that I want to hook my life to. And I'm like, sweet. I think like with anything, like, when we're a part of systems, it can be really hard to be like, oh, like this thing that I love also hurts people. You know what I mean? But I think that that's also part of part of shadow work as well, is like being able to hold the nuance of like, things are often both and, they're rarely actually either or, like good or bad or whatever. It's like, like the binary isn't super helpful for most things, in my opinion anyway. But the piece with the devil, I always come back to like the story of Thomas in with Jesus in the Bible, like after the resurrection. And when he's like, you know, that story always gets told in church from like have like blind faith kind of a way, like don't be like Thomas. And I like, I don't know, blame it on the autism. I like never read it that way. I was like, but this means that God will give you proof if you ask. Like, and that's something that I've had like when I was in church and out of it, that I was like, this doesn't mean like don't have any opposing opinions. Like none of these things are like don't disagree with whatever. That's how it gets used as a form of social control. But if you actually like read the thing, you realize that like there's this compassion and care and understanding of like some people need to like put their hands in the wound. Some people need to get in the depths and the like the dirt of whatever it is to really feel like they feel confident and safe in what they believe. And so I just share that because I think that there are lots of things that are kind of traditionally packaged in Christianity that are not really congruent with what the Bible or like biblical historical theology says. And I think that deconstructing Christianity doesn't mean that you have to stop becoming a Christian. For me, I don't know that I would I mean, I don't think other Christians would classify me as a Christian. I'm like, like not the people that I used to go to church with anyway. But I also don't feel like I actually feel like my faith in the things that are alive in Christianity and alive in me is much deeper than it ever was when I was in the church, if that makes any kind of sense to anyone. And so I think these discussions can help. And I think that like, I just always sit on the side of like, if you unravel something and it falls apart, it wasn't really together in the first place. And that's a terrifying thing to say. I say it so casually, like it's just so fucking easy, which it is absolutely not. But I also know that like anyone who's been like sitting in Christianity and that's like that makes sense to them, and some of these discussions might feel super confronting and really uncomfortable and even might threaten their sense of safety, is that like as someone who's walked through all of that, like the safety I have on the other side of it, even though it might look differently than what I ever could have imagined before, is so much greater. And I wanted to just like share that because I think that it's important, because like we have some tough conversations here, and this is definitely one of those like where it's like, whoo, this can get rocky. But also that like I think that it's important to be like there's no judgment or like, you know, even though I might have spicy feelings because I have religious trauma, it doesn't mean that I hold those feelings for anyone who didn't traumatize me. Like, I just want to be super clear about that. I don't know who's next or kind of what's going on, so I'm going to just hand it back to you, Marina.
Thank you. Renee.
Well, I love what Petra said, because I think she said it so well. I think I am one of those people that needs to stick their hands in the wounds, you know, and then I also kind of follow things that interest me. So part of the reason I was even interested in Lucifer, the Morning Star, was also because when I was younger, I got really interested into the hierarchy of the angels, and their different functions and the different classifications, because there's like thrones and there's like 5 or 6 different classes of angels, but also all of the things I found the most kind of interesting, I think, in the Bible were things that got excluded from the Bible, like Lilith, you know, like the things that they wanted to deny and villainize. And I do feel like, again, when Stephanie is kind of talking about the original sin thing, that's kind of like a way to keep going back and villainize women and say like, well, it's all your fault, like you did this bad thing and everything sucks since you did this bad thing, you know. But um yeah, it's I am not a fan of the Old Testament, I'll just say, but I'm not like, here's the way I love Jesus, which is a very modern way, I think, and it's kind of elitist because you have to have watched Neil Gaiman's American Gods to kind of get it. But I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and they did a television series from one of his books, which is called American Gods. But in that show, there isn't one version of Jesus. There's like 50 versions of Jesus. So there's like a black Jesus and an Asian Jesus and a Jesus that, like, the Mexican Jesus is like the most beautiful Jesus. You know, like there's like 50 different versions of Jesus depending on kind of the premise of the show is any god that's still worshipped is um exists, and if they lose their followers they cease to exist, and the more intense their followers are the more power they have, but there's an uprising of new gods like technology and celebrity and all this that's kind of challenging the old god system, which I know is kind of off on a separate track, but I'm not I'm not like against Jesus. I have a place in my heart for Jesus, but it's a little different, I think, than other people. And this is also on a separate track, but whenever I let all of the missionaries into my house, you know, just because they're usually so young and fresh faced and enthusiastic, and I don't get confrontational with them, but I've had them bring like their elders over to my house when I will not agree or conform with their stuff. And one of the things I have gotten into, I wouldn't say arguments, but conversations with their elders is Jesus never eats meat in the Bible, and this is true. He eats fish, but he never eats meat. And they'll say, like, oh, well, traditionally at this time they would have eaten lamb or whatever. But I'm like, no, no, no. They get so specific about everything in the Bible, down to like toenails, you know. But that never happened. So I'm just anyway, that's one of my kind of personal things because I don't believe in like dominion. Um, I don't believe in dominion over animals and that they were just solely created to be at our disposal. That's a personal thing with me. But anyway, I'm kind of off track. But I guess I was Lucifer. Yeah, the more you kind of like dig into the stories, like they're not as menacing. Like I can think of 10 humans right now that are more evil and scary than Lucifer is to me. Um, and then sorry, you guys, I'm all over the place today, but I'm gonna pass it off to Maria.
Thank you, Renee. I just what Petra was kind of saying pinged me just about something, and I just want to just say again, just remembering well, let me back up. I've had like sorry, well, I get like 50 thoughts in my brain at one time, so then it's just hard because I want to say them all at the same time. So it seems to me that having to like, be put in a box or like to conform to these groups is mostly just about people, about power and control and like some way like being managed. And like I like hate being managed. And for me, it just it's just like I just feel like it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like I just feel like everything, I mean, the more that I deconstruct, it's like everything is on a spectrum to me. Sexuality, gender, religion. I feel like it's a spectrum. Like it's kind of choose what you like want, and I feel like doing kind of the deconstruction stuff and doing the shadow work, like I got to a place where I do feel comfortable like in my bones, in my spirit to like just choose what I want. I feel like my like religion to me, not even religion, like a spiritual practice, really like the I'd love to like just make a t-shirt like the foundation of my spiritual practice is like don't be an asshole. Like don't be an asshole to other people. Don't be an asshole to yourself. And like choose your own adventure. Like there's just such a wide world out there of like information and like using discernment. And I kind of almost love being like my little pendulum in that way to like, kind of being witchy about it of like when I receive information to like really feel like, does this ring true for me? Like in my body, in my spirit, like, does this ring true for me? And just those times where someone has said something, whether it be in person, on here, on the internet, and it like stops you in your tracks and you like feel it in your bones. And like Jen Marie sometimes says like it feels like remembering, or to like it just feels like the biggest like, oh my gosh, yes, like obviously this is so, like, when you have that moment, like, yeah. Um and like that to me is like what it's about, and like being in groups that are supportive of kind of just that way, I mean, yeah, I think that's really what I wanted to say. Let me pop over in the chat. The chat's hopping today. Thank you for the book recommendation. I want to read that, put that on my list. The spectrums, yes. Yeah. My spiritual practice is don't be an asshole. Maybe that's my $1 million idea. So I don't know. Does anyone else feel called to share? Have about 13 minutes. Ezra.
So when you said the just like don't be an asshole thing, like that brought up, I'm reading this book called The Deepest Well, and it's by Nadine Burke Harris. And it's about basically it's about how childhood trauma creates health issues. But one of the things that struck me about it was just like the scientific process and how basically it just is like this, she's having this like slow realization throughout the book that like being an asshole to people, especially baby people, like has physical consequences, right? Like it's a measurable thing that you can see happen. And when I was reading it, I was just like, it really struck me how people who are only really relying on like their eyes in a situation are like, as a science, I also often think of science as like the eyes of humanity. And so they're saying, well, I can't see what the effect of this is. And as we strengthen our eyes, we can eventually get to that point. But it's just like science is like finally coming around to the idea that, maybe you shouldn't be a dick, and there's like actual scientific evidence for why. But it's like something that, one of the people that was in the 80s that did the original the original studies, he was pretty much laughed right out of the medical conference for bringing up the idea that trauma could like literally cause, yes, the ACE studies, the adverse childhood experience studies. And like there was basically, when he presented his evidence, which was a significant study, like 17,000 people in this study, the doctors just like laughed him out of the study. And basically it was like very buried research. Like it was available, but it wasn't talked about until more recently. And I don't know why it just brought it up, but I felt like that was like, I should mention it because it's a really good book. She makes it pretty, it's, mentions sad things, but she has a very she has a tone that makes it easy to read, and is very considerate about how she brings up, you know, childhood trauma stuff. But yeah, when you were just saying that your practice is don't be an asshole, I also vibe with that. You know, I've always felt like, yeah, I saw her TED talk first. And you know, I like to check out the people that I'm reading from, especially more recently. Like if I'm going to buy a book, I want to make sure I'm like not giving my money to like to somebody whose values I don't agree with, basically. But I, as somebody who like for a long time like consider myself a science person, like that is a huge part of my practice. I think there's a lot of you know, there's that the idea that you can like remove yourself from emotional responsibility because you're doing like hard science and logic. And the quote that I always go back to is a mind all logic is a knife all blade. And I always think about, like, I also feel like I vibe with that personally, because I think I am like I think we have a lot of people in the witchy community that are highly sensitive people. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm not a highly sensitive person. And it took me a while to realize that other people were more sensitive than me, and that was okay. And so it's been like, I used to really like get in those like the Reddit forum, am I an asshole? I would go in there and I would just like figure out what I would do in that situation and see how, like, what the reasoning behind everything was to try to figure out how to not be an asshole. And so that's what it struck me as, is like, I have a practice of trying not to be an asshole. That is definitely part of my practice. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Ezra. I just want, some of you may notice Jen Marie had popped off. She's having EMPs that shut off her screen, and then her cat stepped on her power switch. So she was having technical difficulties. So she just wanted me to let everybody know that she's okay. Got more hands. Let's see. Ezra, did you have another weigh in? If not, kick it over to Petra.
No, go ahead, Petra.
Okay. Go ahead, Petra.
Hi. I know we have like 4 minutes, so or 6 minutes. I'm like, my clock is fast. Time is weird. I was like, looked at my phone clock and then looked at my desk clock. I was like, wait a minute. I just have been, I'm not going to get into super specifics just for time's sake and whatnot, but I just have been going through kind of this like a really intense period of like transformation kind of. And it's really tiring. And so I just was like, hey, I wanted to like share that, just to be vulnerable and to also be like, I think I'd let you guys know a while ago that like my landlord was selling our house and it has sold, and so we got our notice to vacate, and so it's like whatever is next feels really like kind of nebulous and overwhelming. And it's also kicked up a lot of stuff because this is the house that my soul dog died in. So I have inner kiddos that are really like, I don't want to leave my puppy. They're freaking out, which is fair. And so I just wanted to like share about that and be like, I know I've been kind of MIA on everything. Like I like come to Sass and then I'm kind of like, I'll come to the things if I have the capacity, but I have not had a lot of capacity. And I know that there's no like expectation of like, hey, you have to show up. If you don't show up, then everybody hates you. Like, no, that's not how this works. But like, I just there's been this like, hey, why am I not telling my like part of my community, like one of my communities, that this is what's happening for me and I'm dealing with a lot of stuff. And I've just been like building more kind of geographical community, I guess. And it's been really powerful, but also very exhausting. And I wanted to be like, hey, I miss you all. And also like if you want to send me some like good vibes or like support energetically or whatever feels comfortable and safe, like I know that my guides will kind of like, you know, let in what I have capacity for when I have capacity for it. They're like, we're the regulators, it's fine. But like, yeah, it's just been like the letting myself have disconfirming experiences of trauma stuff in real time is just like, whoo, there's been a lot of emotions. So but I'm also really proud of myself because I can feel how much I'm growing. And it's one of those things where like eclipse season is coming up. I think on the 25th is the lunar eclipse, and then the solar eclipse is on the 8th of April. And they keep being like, you know, if you're Cancer, any of the cardinal signs like Cancer, Libra, I think Capricorn, and I don't remember what the fire one is. But that you're gonna kind of be going through it, and it feels not as crappy as the last eclipse season, which was like in my north node, which is like the direction of your life, and also in like my Venus, and also I have 3 Scorpio placements, so it was like that one was just like wrecked my shit a little bit. It was like happening while I was doing a lot of trauma work. I feel like this one's going to be good. I just also am like very aware that I think my life has started, I got into the place in trauma healing where I've slowed things down, but now external things are speeding stuff up, if that makes sense. And the energy is very intense. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that and also be like, thanks for being there and just like always having space for my info dumps and feelings and whatever else. I'm just really grateful for all of you. That's it. Ta-da! There's 2 minutes left.
Thank you for sharing with us, Petra. We love you. Okay. Let me just check the chat for any final weigh-ins. If I missed anything in the chat and anyone just wants to weigh in, feel free to do that. All right, witches. Goes by fast, doesn't it? The 2 hours. Like we could probably stay on for like 4 hours and still be talking. Let's see. So today is the 17th. So on the 21st, for those in the foundations program, we'll have Witchworks Circle to do our spellcraft. Can hit us up on the website. We have a chat, or just email support at Bright and Dark if you ever have any questions about anything. That is the best place to reach us. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next week.